All right, welcome to the Philosopher King. We've got a special guest this evening, but before I introduce him, I just want to remind everybody, encourage you to check out the phone booth podcast.substack.com. There's, I think, 7 different podcasts now there. And so there's just tons of great content coming out all the time. So definitely go check it out. You'll be seeing this on Christmas Eve. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to be playing this recording live on Christmas Eve. So it'll be there for you. But I'm very excited. I saw, if you haven't seen yet, Russ just a couple weeks ago, I think it was, had a really nice, our guest this evening, Russ, had a really nice conversation with the Phone Booth Boys on the Phone Booth podcast, Vince and Ted. And their conversation was very intriguing and inspiring. And a couple times I was so flattered. They both said, Russ, you got to talk to Jonah. You got to go on Philosopher King. You got to deep dive with Jonah. So very humbled by that, but I'm excited. I think the conversation is going to be great. In fact, in our little pre-show, it already started to get so good. I was like, wait. I'm going to do the intro and we're going to start recording this because I want people to hear this. So anyways, I think it's going to be a fantastic conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I know I will. Without further ado, Russ, welcome, sir.
Hey, how you doing, Jonah? It's good to talk to you.
It's a pleasure to have you, man. So, my goodness. So I'm just going to kind of recap a little bit of your story for folks of what I understood it to be. And that way you can help cure any misunderstanding of
Sure.
mine as well as everybody watching at the same time. My understanding is that about 6 months ago, you woke up and started exploring different controversies and conspiracies and realizing the veil started to fall, so to speak. And you started to see past all the deceptions. And then, as you mentioned earlier tonight, one of the first ones for you was the nuclear bomb hoax, and then it just kind of cascaded from there. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's the nuclear bomb thing. We can put a date on it. It was when Joe Biden came out and said he was going to give cruise missiles to Ukraine to use to target inside of Russia, and so he had been crossing red lines, whatever. But
Yeah,
when he came out and made that announcement, growing up in the '80s and having watched, the day after and all this, that trigger word, that concept, and then it occurred to me that it works too well. We're all too programmed to fear this. And that's when I looked again afresh at how they were behaving, and I thought, they don't even believe this. That's why he did it, because it's not going to happen, and they were just going to work it out. So then I went back and I said, okay, well, if that's true, then what was the Trinity blast? So I said, well, let me go see what they told the locals when it happened, right? Because they didn't know. It was a secret. So somebody saw the flash. So they told the locals that it was just an ammo dump. And I thought, well, if they can tell the locals it's an ammo dump, why can't you just blow up an ammo dump and tell us it's a nuke? Right? Because
yeah,
that's what happened.
exactly.
So the big story that ties into that, and the reason I got shadow banned off of X, is because through going back and trying to validate my theory, I validated all of it. And then I came upon the fact that what appeared to me was that Kennedy was not informed that nukes were fake, and that they were taking him on a snipe hunt for the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then when he found that out, when Dimona was exposed as a prop, when they did the inspection at Dimona, which is what started the whole thing. So after he did that, that's when he said there is a conspiracy in this country, of guerrillas by night instead of armies by day.
Yeah.
That's what he was referring to. And that's why he was so upset, was because he was pissed that he had been played for a punk. Because what we gave up was the cruise missiles in Turkey for the fake nukes in Cuba. So they got something out of him.
Well, and then what's interesting that is interesting, and it's also intriguing that if you look at the original experiment where they had the 2 islands separate, and they did an experiment to test the size so that they knew how much dynamite or
Yeah.
whatever. Well, it was 40,000 tons of dynamite in both locations or whatever the number was, right? And they just told each group that they were the dynamite and the other was the nuke.
Oh,
And so it's very interesting because they kept it very on the DL who was team A and who was team B, so
so
to
your
speak.
side, that is see that I that's just further, that's the little evidences and little inconsistencies that prove all this.
So
I
there's a deeper motive, I believe, to why they did this as well, because it was important for them to blacklist uranium.
yes,
Okay, the
yes,
reason it was important for
radium.
uranium to be blacklisted as a highly radioactive, dangerous substance was because of what was related to what happened not too long earlier, the Hindenburg. I know in some of the old architecture we see the airship docking structures, right? Which I think you guys talked about on your cast as
Well,
well
I
with
went to
Ted.
the Capitol in Louisiana, which the Louisiana State Capitol was built to be an air mast.
Okay, so um, uranium, a little canister of uranium, when it has a short half life, but when it off gases massive amounts of helium. And so
Oh,
so
that is
that's how
awesome.
they kept the Airbuses afloat. Those Airbuses could stay afloat for 21 days. Okay, so think about it. That happened in 36, I think, was the Hindenburg.
Yes,
What happened
yes,
shortly before that? 32 to 34 is when Admiral Byrd made his
yes.
second, more substantial exploratory journey down
And
and found the ice wall.
every one of his explorations was financed by the Freemasons. He opened the first Freemason Masonic Lodge in Antarctica.
Right, but the reason they had exactly, but the reason, and there's a pyramid down in Antarctica, all that stuff. But the reason
Yes,
they had to ground the airships was because there was no way they could prevent people from getting to the ice wall and
yes,
seeing what was over it if you could stay in the air for 21
yes. Well,
days,
and you know
right?
what? You know what else they don't want? See, I've got another thread. I had suspected that the hot springs, the mineral healing water springs
Yeah.
fad, that died at the same time. And I had noticed that a lot of the springs were going through lithium and magnesium deposits, which I had
Mm,
theorized was bringing helium up because it's in that periodic table element. That might have been where they were getting the helium because France, where they first started doing their airships, was close to two natural springs as well. And then when they
interesting.
wanted to lock down helium, they shut down the helium springs.
Interesting. Very interesting. Huh.
I'm sure it's tied together exactly, but your thing is because there's something to the radium. What was the radium that everybody was heating their house with? So
Right.
there's a boogeyman, especially with mercury, because mercury they use to lock on to the magnetic field lines, and that's how they're doing the trains. That's how they took down the World Trade Center.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, you typically have at the top of those old world tech, you typically had a sphere in the air, and that was Mercury, if I'm not mistaken,
The
and
Woolworth building had a secret upper chamber that they would have meetings in.
and that would harvest. But that sphere filled with Mercury at the top of the spires, or halfway up the top the spire, is what would pull down all of the energy from the ether, and that mercury, because it was like a magnetic attractor for all of the electrical currents that were going
Well,
through
the
the
way I know they're using
ether.
mercury, mercury does something that they hinted at with the T-1000 and Terminator. That at a certain amount of voltage, mercury stiffens and becomes almost like a solid. It's still got
Mm,
properties of a fluid, but when they do that, when you electrify mercury in a bowl, and it'll start to rotate by itself, right? And then
hmm.
at a certain amplitude, it stiffens and creates, and then with the coils around it, it creates a horizontal magnetic field, right? At a certain frequency. So you've got a wave train that's got troughs at a certain gap, right? And then when
Hmm.
you match that to the magnetic field line that they're running, which is anchored by two core purified. I forget the material they use for magnets, but they reflect the wave back into a line, just like a laser, but a magnetic field. So just like a magnet
Hmm.
has a wave, and then when you match that, the waves will link in. So you'll be running a vertical one, so it's just like two gears. And then when you match, they lock in, and that's the instant acceleration you see with the UAP phenomenon, because
Yep.
that's what we're doing. It's all Tesla technology.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's essentially, I mean, it's just like, I mean, so I was a engineering major back in the day, and one of my favorite classes to this day was the electromagnetics class,
Well,
and
our world
that's
is electromagnetic.
Yeah, and that's the first time that I realized that, this idea of that they're equal and opposite, they're complementary forces. Where you find one, you always find the other, and they stop there. But wouldn't it be wonderful if they taught us that that means, actually, it implies without them saying it? Wouldn't it be nice if they kind of connected the dots for us,
They
that
did in the
because
mystery
my
schools. That's what the mystery
be,
schools would teach.
right, but because my compass works, I could also pull a current out of that air.
Yes.
Have you heard
Well,
of
no, exactly.
electroculture?
And what they're saying, you know how the old uh, factories would run on a single axle that they would throw loops, leather straps
Yeah.
over, and you would run everything. You can do the same thing with these magnetic lines. So you would have nodes that would come off of this magnetic field line that was running above you, right? And then you'd be able to run anything on it. And then if you do the frequency right with the 369, which is a harmonic equation, not a math formula, it's three is the first whole note, six is the end of the whole that note, but the nine is the rebirth of that note in resonance back at the original fourth, and then it's perpetual energy.
So I remember you saying that on with the guys. I wanted to mention that to you, actually, because one of my favorite. Have you ever heard? So you heard the Gregorian chant little short that I did
Yes.
with Vince, right? So when I was in that monastery, and you have these two choirs on opposite sides of the sanctuary, right? When everyone is singing those same notes, often, depending on the size of the shape of the church, and whether it's built as those huge cathedrals should be built structurally, um, you can actually hear what they call a ghost tone. There's When the two choirs are singing, there's a third note that's
That's the
about an octave.
binaural beat. That's the binaural
It's
beat that only exists in your head.
it's about an octave above, and it's clearly audible by everyone, but it's about an octave above, and it's created by the perfect synchronization of the overtones. It's incredible.
No, and that's what all this is about. That everything that they tell us is not what it really is, and that's what I'm saying. The deception, like so, and so many people have been tripped up because the rule of the cosmos, which means law, is that if you use this knowledge for self enrichment, it doesn't work. So you have to do it with the intention to help because the universe aligns to God's plan. And when you align with God's plan, the universe yields to you. So that's
Yeah.
how so that's the thing. So that Edgar Casey, which I know is way off topic, but it's the template which I'm laying a lot over and it's fitting. So
Yeah, so I know he's definitely has some interesting takes. I read up a little bit on him, um, since you mentioned him a few times. The one thing that I would just advise caution, because it
mhm,
seems to me to be off base, is in terms of core beliefs. Obviously, techniques and everything else we could talk about, but
yeah.
in terms of core beliefs or conclusions, he started not believing in reincarnation, and then transitioned and started later on in his life believed in reincarnation.
He
And I
did.
and I think that the reincarnation notion is really problematic from a moral standpoint, because then you have no argument against Joseph Stalin's destroying 70 lives, because he's just resetting them to a better future. Just reset, hit reset, just send them back to the factory so they can be spit out next time,
No,
hopefully better.
absolutely. But
you
his
know?
his his thing is a little more nuanced. The more I read, because I was confused too. Now before I even give him credit for anything, let me just address the natural question: is why didn't he know this was a deception if he was going to the Akashic record, right? Because of all the stuff that I read that seems so. Is Casey? This is my concern. Is Casey a plant? Because this deception, so many people think that the first answer to the crime, they don't think that somebody who would commit this crime would have two and three misdirective persons to blame. I'm sure there's several layers of separation between that, and it's my belief, and I can prove that the people calling or the entities calling the shots are not even on this, not in this dimension. So
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's actually one of. I mean, I think there's a lot of similarities in his techniques to the dark techniques of Aleister Crowley, and
absolutely.
that's a huge red flag for me. But I think it's really important. One thing I really liked that you said in the interview with Ted and Vince was that these evil people who are these evil oligarchs who have assumed control through various means of manipulation. They're if they're not actually demons themselves, they're controlled very closely by them.
I call them
And
Renfields, Dracula's daemon that
there
have
you
to.
go.
And so, and that's kind of the way I see them. They don't seem that. I was suspicious because none of the Rothschilds seem smart enough to be coming up with any of this because they're all inbred, all of them. And like
They're
when Trump
uncomfortable to
had
look
that
at,
dinner,
actually.
when Trump had that dinner with Bill Gates and all the other tech people or whatever,
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
he doing? And I was like, what, you guys don't realize they're all bloodline bastards. That's why Jeffrey Epstein wanted to have 60, 80, 100 progeny out there because that's how they dilute the gene pool because they've got to marry in the family. So they compensate by lots of bastards.
So one of the I think of most important deceptions in history, just it's I guess probably not the most important, but it's a very important one
Yeah,
that's formed a lot of people's impressions of historic Catholicism. Not today's Vatican. That's obviously evil. I'm not talking
that's
about that.
obviously a husk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Obviously, a husk. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect word for it. A shallow shell, a hollow shell. Yes, I love it. So, but back in the day, what's interesting is because you talked about bloodlines, there's a book called Malleus Maleficorum. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
So it's an old. It was written in the 16th century, around the time of the Inquisition, and it was a Spanish exorcist priest who wrote it in Latin. And Malleus Maleficorum literally means a witch hammer. So the first half of the book is him talking about all the philosophical principles first to understand and determine what demons can and cannot do, what we can consider part of psychosis or human sickness or
Yeah,
imagination or delirium.
that is
And
a
when that crosses, amazing. When that crosses over into preternatural, not supernatural, because just because the demons have a higher nature than us, it's not supernatural. Only God does supernatural
yeah.
above all of nature. So preternatural just means it's above our nature, right? But then he goes into, okay, which of the magical arts, what of those things are attributed to demons, what of those things, the effects of those arts are attributed to hidden properties within natural things that God put there, you
Yes.
know, like just cannabis or DMT, like these things, there are certain effects in the body and the brain that God put there, right? Or healing qualities of different herbs. Anyways, so that's the first half, is more the theoretical stuff, like the more general principle stuff. Then he goes and describes the political ambiance and why it was such a highly charged time. And then lastly, he tells some stories, and the stories are wild. Like I'll give you one of them
Yeah, no.
before I get into the history, right? But the one is, so there was this woman who had cursed this town. They had this medieval town. She was pestering the town, so they're like, "All right, well, we're gonna kill you because you're killing all of our livestock and whatever." And she said, "Okay, fine. If you kill me, then I'm gonna put a curse on this whole town, and you're all gonna slowly die of a plague of some kind, mysterious sickness, very slowly until I've consumed my funeral veil." So they put the funeral veil and buried her, as was customary. And so they called this exorcist for help. So he comes, interviews everybody, he's figuring it out. Okay, here's and finally gathers and puts together the story of what happened. So he's like, "Show me her grave." So they go and dig up this woman's grave, and sure enough, the funeral veil was halfway consumed into her corpse. And so he struck her head off, said exorcism prayers to break the curse, and everybody in the town healed.
Now I believe that only because
Wild, right?
that touches on some things that I've been seeing. Like so, the awakening. I just want to say is it's just like just noticing, I mean, and being able to, and what you said about what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. So they're in the lower fourth dimension. So that means they're not bound by time. And that this is going back, this stems from why they're talking about physics hasn't done enough lately, that they even admit that they've doled out technology to us too slow. And they said it was too slow in the 70s. And I thought, well, if I didn't know I need it, what in the fuck's it matter, excuse me, when I got it, right? So I thought, well, then the fact that it was too slow would imply that what they're worried about is the timeline contractions happening. We're going to awake. Our intention is going to resort back to being in harmony with nature, which is because this timeline is based on a deception, a coup, I think, of the patriarchy back in like 1776 or whatever. There's a bunch of different timelines. But this one is becoming unstable because it's coming upon the collision point, which they use the looking glass, which is when it goes white, which is, and they're freaking out because they didn't give us enough technology. Since they can't create nothing, they can only steal our technology from our future. And that's why they always say that they're 30 years ahead of us. I think that's about the distance they can reach into the future.
Well, so okay, couple things. I love this conversation. Okay, so couple things. So going back again in Malleus Maleficorum, what is the nature of a demonic entity, and how does it experience time, if at all? Right. For
Yes.
God, all time is present in the eternal now.
Yep.
Right.
There is no past. There's no future.
For us, because time is essentially the measure of movement, and for us as physical beings, that movement is very regular, like the sun, circumscribing the earth,
But
right?
it's changing for us now.
Okay, but for us, it's very linear in a sense, right? There's before and after because it measures movement. Since angelic entities or pure intelligences as they are, since their only actions, so they're what's called aviternal, which is they have a beginning in time but no end in time. They're right. So they didn't exist forever. They started to exist at one point when God said, "Let there be light." That was creating angelic intellects. Um, then he says, sorry. So then, how is their movement measured with time? So they only, it's how, whenever they interact with things on this earth, that's to them a step forward in time. So they can never go back in time. They can see and
Ooh.
anticipate forward, also because this ties into the flood. See, this is really interesting, and the Tower of Babel, because what I think is, like, if you look at the Antiquitech, so they're looking back at human history where they've gotten before, when we all spoke one language, and
Yep.
God had to say, "Okay, hold up, you guys are getting too advanced," right?
I'm
That's where a lot of this,
for that. I got something for you.
yeah, that's where a lot of this Antiquitech comes from, and so I think that's where the demonic entities are guiding us now. So they know we've been there, and they're the ones who helped us build it back then, and now they're trying to do it in a more of a controlled and navigated fashion. I don't think it's so much looking, they can see forward because we've been there before, right? In terms of they can see what's coming and what's capable and what lies hidden dormant
I
in
think
the
since
natures of things.
their frequency is higher than ours, so we're in a lower density. So I think they're limited to how far back into a density they can look. Because if you're looking back, they're looking into a denser field. So I liken it like this because of the time thing. Okay, so why does a bird wait to the last second to get out of the way of your car? It's because they have a higher flicker rate in their optical nerve, which means that they are analyzing things at a higher rate. And
Correct.
that also means that for them, it actually was slower. So the more
Right.
per second you absorb, the longer the distance seems to be, right?
Right.
So like for a fly that has multiple lenses, or for any animal that has a higher flicker rate, they live less longer than we do because they've actually lived longer in their head in their timeline. So you're seeing evidence of timeline differences just in the creation, and that applies to us all having a shared consciousness. Now, the way Casey explains it is that dogs and cats both have a shared consciousness like we do, and that our Christ consciousness has asked them to watch us. Because see, we're under a deception, but we're the only ones under it, not the animals. And they think we've lost our damn mind. And when I came off of Monk's Mound to activate it, because it was a node tied into the magnetic ley lines. That was their energy systems, were the Indian Mound. So I went up to Monk's Mound and I prayed, and I had a vision that a god and an elder and a person that was in all shade, and I thought it was me, came up and put their hand on my shoulder. But then, okay, so aside from that, then when I came down off the mound and went back to my car, a tree called me over and explained to me that Dutch elm disease was a hoax and they were killing the trees because their frequency was too close to ours, and they were afraid the trees would tell us the deception. And I think that's the same reason they don't want to swim in with dolphins, and the same reason they're telling people not to go out into the nature over on the East Coast somewhere, where I heard something where they didn't want people outside because we're out of harmony with nature. But like the way you put a room full of metronomes that'll eventually all sync up.
Yeah.
That's why they
Yeah.
keep changing our daylight savings time. That's why they keep changing things, is so that we don't get in tune with nature, because eventually we will.
Yeah, well, and I think that's part of why, we live in concrete jungles. Our shoes are rubber soles, like
It's because
everything they
we don't
can
know
to
the
prevent us
universe.
from
They've
grounding.
lied to us. And that's what the spell they cast. They said they've cast a spell on us. They have told us that we live in a universe that doesn't exist. We live in a world, a universe, a reality that's based on electromagnetics. The proof is in their own words that they tell us that quantum physics is where things gets real small and then physics starts operating differently. No, that is physics. The stuff they told you is a lie. There's no law of thermodynamics. There's no all these laws. That's the spell. We limit ourselves because we're part of God. We're born without sin. We're part of Christ, and we do not need to beg Him for our absolution because we've done nothing wrong and we've been lied to.
Well, so what's interesting is obviously, yeah, when we're first born, we have no personal sin. That's correct. But what is interesting is there it does seem to be a shared brokenness.
Oh,
Um,
we're severed.
and
This is our time of severance because
and what
the venom in the apple.
what's in, exactly so what's interesting though, and what I this is just my theory. I don't know. I haven't heard it anywhere else. I was telling Ted
That
about
is
it the other
probably right.
day, but you're kind. So now, if have you heard about, like, so mitochondria? We know it comes from our mother, right? We don't. That's not mitochondria is independent of our DNA. It has a different
That's why
DNA.
they put down royalty through a matriarchal line in the past.
And that's why the small hats, that's why, they focus very much on the matriarchal line. What's interesting is all of that genetic uh, um, code of the mitochondria all goes back to Adam and Eve. But all diseases that break us down and hurt our health and cause a shorter lifespan all come from metabolic dysfunction. What is that? That's the failure of the mitochondria.
No,
So
it's because
back
we're not eating ether. It's metabolic because we're eating petrol-soaked weeds.
Well, we're eating toxic things, but yeah,
Yeah,
so if we had a non-toxic food, like you're
yeah.
saying, then that would be. But what's interesting is, and maybe that's why before the flood versus after the flood, there was such a huge difference in lifespan, because before the flood, it was like 500-700
No, no, no,
years
no, no.
people lived,
Absolutely, Jonah. Let me tell you,
right?
it's happening now. That's what I want to tell you. That's the good news, and that's why I've been so adamant about talking to people. Is because see, I'm beginning to see past the veil myself because I'm seeing the faces, all the pictures, and if you can see the faces I'm showing you in the pictures, your
Mm-hmm.
eyes are changing too. That's the optical nerve. That's why the Illuminati started from an optical guild. It's because
Mm-hmm.
they understand that there are tells. I've got images. I can show you images from Samara early on that actually have ether in the sculpture. That they are completely misreading the meaning of the sculptures because they're not seeing the ether as a part of what they're looking at, and that's the way they've been tripping us up because it's like they use the analogy they put a bunch of fleas under a jar for 3 days and then you take the jar away and they'll never jump higher than that jar. That's what they did to us.
Yeah, yeah.
But said we're not so we're even having this conversation, Jonah, is proof that it's coming back and that I have photos of the ether being collected in the Sahara Desert and that there's a vascular
Huh.
system reemerging.
Well, and actually, they say that it was the tree from the tree of life that was
There's more than
actually
one, but yeah.
perfect food
Yep.
that would nourish us,
Mm-hmm.
and we wouldn't need anything beyond that,
Yep.
and we would live forever. But yeah, so it's interesting that once you have that metabolic break,
Yep.
then the mana helps sustain you. But what's interesting to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, something changed in our atmosphere before and after the flood. Now we
Somebody,
know that the gates of heaven were opened, and the water came down, and the gates of the fonts of the earth were pushed, and water flowed forth from below. It's reasonable to think that the shape of the earth changed, not the shape, but like the terrain. So maybe, I heard Ted
it
ask
does.
about
It
the
does. I can explain that.
California was an island and then not. And so, like, obviously all of that. But what's interesting is it says in scripture then that after the waters had subsided, there was a rainbow that God gave as a sign that God would never destroy the earth through flood again, which is really interesting, which implies that Noah and his children and everybody else on that boat never had seen a rainbow before. That was the first time. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a good sign if it was something they saw all the time. So
Yeah.
something significant must have
Well, no,
changed in the
no, that's
atmosphere.
that's a really good point because that, but the rotation and that the cycle. So it says that God is a refiner of silver, and that this is the end of this entire cycle. So at the end of this, Jonah, is that those of us that are awake and collapse the wave, we are the meek. That meek does not mean weak. Meek means
Right.
quiet confidence in knowing.
Mm-hmm.
So those of us who know what we're doing will collapse the wave, change the timeline, and then but we'll stay here on earth and we will inherit this earth and see it restored. That's what Casey has said is supposed to happen in 26 or 27. And there's the Prague astronomical clock, which is the countdown to what's coming, which is why the Spanish broke all the codexes, because that countdown they've altered. But it's actually counting the Antikythera mechanisms count down to the same thing. It's all the
See,
cycles that at the end of each cycle, those of us that ascend who have purified their light enough to raise their frequency. And the size difference that was explained to me was that as we fell, the fall of man is when we were severed, our pineal gland, when we were severed from the consciousness, right, that watches us. That was the fall of man because before we spoke in resonant telepathy. So the base frequency of our resonance is in 10. So that's why we couldn't be deceived
well,
because
and
we
also
know our
like
intent.
our before the poison of the apple, as you mentioned earlier, or as you put it earlier, we had all knowledge of all things,
Yes.
and so we would have all. I mean, if you look at all the Antiquitech, and if we were to take, for sake of argument, if we were to just accepting the hypothesis, let's
Yeah.
say that the pre-flood world was what we call Tartarian Antiquitech, right? Then, if that's true, then it would make sense that if they had knowledge of all things, then
You wouldn't need to write nothing down, and that's why there's no
no,
blueprints for all those great works of architecture because
right,
you would just it would everything that was done would look like a gang of Amish people building a barn because everybody would have
right.
human efficiency because the night before your consciousness, your Christ consciousness would give you your labor assignment, each according to his needs, each according to his ability. Everything we've been doing in this deception has been a mimic of what we had naturally. That being with the Neuralink and the internet, we used to have instant knowledge, but now they tried to recreate it, which is what I was saying about the cryogenics. Why are they obsessed with cryogenics? Well, if the firmament is engulfed by ice, which is an ice wall, then that means that people have been thawed out. And I suspect that there has been a civilization discovered in the Antarctica, and that whole core ice sample drilling is just cover for them thawing out people.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a
It's an
theory.
interesting theory. Yeah.
Had it today
Um,
because everything started lining up. I was like, why do they want to? Why do they tell people they can be thawed out?
yeah. Well, I know I heard you talk about the vibes of cosmos, reflection of the moon on the earth, and I think it's that whole, it's like a negative reverse image.
Yeah,
Is super fascinating. I want to
there's a way to
dig.
prove that, and then it also proves why I'm right. Is that the only light you could see on a negative image would be a gamma ray, and there are flashes of gamma rays on the moon, and they are centered on what would be Arizona, where all the world trees were last cut down, and that
Mm,
in Stanton, I was in Stanton, Arizona, up at the Lost Dutchman mine camp, and I had noticed that valley we were in, the wash was lined in petrified bark.
hmm,
So it was so the mesa that's Yarnell is next to is a tree stump that was felled to the direction of Stanton, and that I was down there because my original vision told me that the Grand Canyon was formed by a plasma strike, and that is why gold nuggets are found on the surface, because it was blown out of the ground in this hot cloud, and that's why a sandstone has a uniform color, because that's what happens when you superheat different elements, is they become a separate color, and that the ash cloud is laying on top of what they call a lava field, but it's melted granite from the other heat event that comes with the plasma strike.
So there's another theory that I feel is compelling, that may be related to that,
Mhm.
but it gives a slightly different explanation. May,
I could be wrong, but talking to you, to somebody else that can throw out,
yeah. So one idea that I had is a lot of those stones that I've heard, not that I had, that I've heard that resonates with me, is that the um, that was the one of the largest quarries. That was the largest quarry in the world, and that's where they pulled a lot of the stone that was then moved around the world for the Antiquitech because of the purity of that stone there, etc. And there's no way we don't even have the tools to cut the stones that they had.
well,
But then there
they
was
were, it's
also
alchemy. It's alchemy. It's why they burnt down all the cities in the 1800s, was to get
right.
to the base alchemical material that was in the bricks.
Well, and like like Chicago was firebombed. Like there were
Mm-hmm.
so many places that there was. They said it was a cow knocking over a lantern. Yeah, for sure, that was a firebomb city. And it was to partially, a large part, to destroy all the world's fairs cities, and
and
that's
and
why.
because there was a coup, because see, these people that are running this deception are, they're under the name of the patriarch, that they don't know how to make the catalyst to make alchemy. That's why they were recycling the stones. So if you look at the pictures of the all the great fires of that time, they were just like Lahaina and Pacific Palisades. All the buildings were already purchased, and that's why you have townspeople sitting up on the hill watching it burn, because they'd all been paid. It was a recovery effort to recycle the brick.
Interesting, interesting. Um, Yeah, well, it's interesting too. So one of the things I heard though is that the Holy Land in Scripture is not actually what is current day Israel. The trees that were used to make Noah's Ark, for example, are
Mhm.
only grow in Florida
And now,
in
yeah,
the
the
whole
gopher
world.
it goes through. Yeah.
Yes,
We
and
were
then
Egypt. All the great civilizations have passed through North America.
but then the what is it called? Um, It was like the great cedars of Lebanon to the north. If you look up in like northwestern corner of our country, those sequoias, those enormous, there's no other trees comparable to those in size today. So that it seems to be something there. And then um, Salt Lake City is matches the description of, or Salt Lake matches the description, because there are actually remains of 7 ancient cities around Salt Lake that they
You
found.
know what's funny? You know what's funny? Just coming in here to this. This is I don't mean to cut you off, but I had told my wife some of the topics I'd come up with, and I said, and I haven't even done tunnels. And then I said, every city seems to have a tunnel under it. And then I said, well, why did they call Phoenix Phoenix? That's rising from the ashes. And I said, literally, just now while we were driving back to the house, I said, Google if Phoenix has an underground. It does.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there an underground city under Phoenix that just was,
Mm-hmm.
that city was supposed to be brand
Well, and then the other thing that ties biblical events to here is the actual Mount. What is it called?
new?
Mount
Maru?
Rushmore.
Oh, that's a tree stump.
But it's also it's allegedly it was actually made by King Solomon in order to store all of his gold. It was
I believe that.
his treasure, highly guarded treasure trove.
I believe that. I came upon a image of Mount Rushmore before they carved the face. And you know what I saw? The same hexagonal root system as in Devil's Tower, but after they carved the face, it's buried in the rock fall.
Mm.
And I thought, well, that's awfully convenient, isn't it? That hexagonal shape that we see at Giants, at Devil's Tower, and all these other places got covered. But I mean, it would just seem like a really clever way to hide that. But then you can look at the original photo before they put the face in it, and you can see a line of elephants. So there's etheric imprints and everything. That's the other thing about the airships was if you were able to loiter over the landscape, you would see the soul imprints that are on everything. And I
Mm.
think I sent you some of those pictures I'll send
Mm-hmm.
you the Mount Rushmore photo, and you can see
Please
it.
do.
Right from the
Yeah.
left down, there's like 4 elephants in a row walking.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
And then they just covered them all with the faces.
Yep.
Interesting. They chose 4 faces as well.
That's where I first miracle was when as a matter of fact, I was parked that area where you're saying in Salt Lake City. There's a confluence of 11 magnetic ley lines right to the east, immediately, right by the Quinta Mountains, which is an
Mm-hmm.
east-west magnetic ley line. That's why it's raised up east-west and not north-south like all the others.
Right.
So in that valley, that's where that confluence, which is there's another one just south of the United States in a Mexican town called Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that they have a giant quarry there as well. If anybody's got Google, you might want to look at it. I didn't want to go there. That's why I went to Stanton because I didn't want to. I found an old placer gold map from 1953, and I thought, okay, well, if each nugget field marked on this map is a possible radius from where the gold originated, then I should go down there and take a look because there were these little maps. And that's when I discovered that's where they bury. So they mix. So everything that's on this plane is a periodic table element. And alchemy is more like baking than beaker labs. So
Right.
they're mixing the minerals and burying it in the ground, and then they put a lightning rod on top of it. And then when the firmament shifts, it builds up the static. There's giant plasma strikes, and it kind of goes back to the save the clock tower. I need 1.21 gigawatts, and
Yeah. Yeah.
Dayline thing is kind of like why the 88 miles an hour. And then you realize that there's so many repeats and remakes because they can't create, like I said, they're demons. They can't.
Yeah.
So when they run out of our stuff from the future, that's why they start recycling things. So that's
Yeah. Do
and
you
you
have
know
an?
this whole thing is like a self-reinforcing concept, and I'm reminded of the first Terminator movie where Reese is being interviewed by the psychiatrist, and he says it's the damnedest thing I've ever seen, the most intricate self-reinforcing delusion. I think I'm going to do a paper on it, and that's what I felt like I woke up in was like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Did you have you ever heard that the Matrix and Terminator series were both written by the same author, and the
That
Terminator.
colored lady that said that she was explaining it.
Yeah, so
One was a
apparently, yeah, so apparently Terminator was about the machines going back in time trying to prevent John Connor from destroying the whole system as the one. Very interesting.
so much of. Did you know that one of the old gods is Yoda? I got a picture of him on a rock. So Yoda is from I think the Zohar or
Okay.
some of the old Yiddish fairy tales like
Yeah.
the Golem of Prague, which is Palantir's pre-crime algorithm that they're going to put in the robot. But that's not going to happen, and that's why I didn't want to start out with Ted and Vince with this doom and gloom because one, everybody's got it, and two, I mean, we have an attraction to it. But what got me started on Tataria and the Mud Flood was I hate riddles. So when I got hooked on Tataria because I liked architecture, I said to myself, I'm going to figure this one out. It shouldn't be that hard, right? It's what I thought. I said, the answer should be there. And then that's when I just started having epiphanies. And
Well, and it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting too when you see like the old star fort footprints and like the shapes of the star forts. That's not any modern mind put that together.
oh, no,
Do you
because
have an opinion on how those fit into the ley lines, or if how
yeah,
those
no,
fit
the
into?
star forts were designed because ether collects at points, just like electricity. So that's why they
Okay.
always have so your tip compresses, so like kind of like an airfoil sends the air over the wing. A tip creates a bunch point for where you can tap into the ether.
Oh,
So
okay.
so that's the star force. That's why they call them batteries because
Have,
they're
have you heard
drawing
of?
ether, they're storing it,
Yeah, nice. Have you heard of electroculture? You would really like it if you
and
haven't.
it works. It
It
works.
does.
That's the universe we live in, and that's what we need. get back to, and that's why I was so eager to talk to you about the ether.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's interesting, and that's actually why Mickelson Morley is such an important experiment for me because for me, okay, when somebody sets out to prove one thing with their agenda in their own mind, they're to prove their theory, and they reach the opposite conclusion repeatedly,
Repeatedly.
that just that frustrates their own ideas. That's to me the most reliable of conclusions because
An NPC can't change his mind.
well, and not only that, but because it was they couldn't get it to do what they wanted to.
Yeah.
The reality of the natures of things trumped their own will. So it shows that they were actually sincerely doing the experiment, not fudging the numbers to make it look like they wanted, right? It was honest work. And so Mickelson and Morley proved the existence of the ether
Yes.
and proved that the earth is not moving through it, which absolutely that was the real nuke,
Well, that was
so to
that
speak.
was the hijacking. That's when they got us, because when they
It was
instituted that,
Einstein.
they lied about what universe we're in.
Well, it was Einstein was the band-aid to save the heliocentric model after Michelson Morley because of the results. If Michelson Morley was allowed to stand without, this bending of space, the fabric of space time,
Because of gravity. There is no
preposterousness.
gravity.
It's
There's a local
buoyancy.
phenomenon. We have
Yeah,
a
it's
local
buoyant.
phenomenon that's caused by density and buoyancy and the
Right,
natural attraction of oxygen to neutral, which our ground is base neutral.
right. Have you seen? So I have. Have you seen they have like grounding sandals or earthing sandals?
The grounding plates that I actually tried one. I didn't. We're so polluted right now. I don't know what I.
So, not what I recommend is go to um, what is it called now? Earthrunners, earthrunners.com.
Uh-huh.
They're actually, they look like Jesus sandals. They're very thin sandals
Found
with
you.
copper over the top of the foot that goes down through and connects to the earth below. So your copper's it doesn't look funny because it's a copper
Yeah.
mesh, just looks like a normal fabric strap, but it's copper mesh. And so you're grounded. I've worn those for years. I even have in my house, but my bed sheets, and I'm kind of showing you what kind of a nerd I am too.
Yeah.
My mouse pad is plugged into the wall for grounding.
Well,
Even my mouse pad, like I'm
let me say
always
something.
grounded.
Let me jump in because you're onto something so huge that I saw in the Samaran sculptures I was looking at, which I had put
Uh-huh.
an album for Hidden Truths. But when they show those people with the pine cone, right?
Yeah.
I don't know yet what the pine cone is. We'll figure that out later. But I noticed two things. One, that their rank is in their earrings, in their ear headgear, it tells their rank in that structure, and that all of them have war injuries that have copper bands around them. And that's how they
Mm,
used to treat injuries, was they put copper around it, and then that would attract the. So the other thing I want to say is that the Rife machine, orgone accumulators, orgone is ether.
right.
Mana ether is it's like the concept of ether as what we would consume to live was driven by two things. One, my question of why did we put potash on plants? How is a mineral a food, right? And by itself, and that why did I just have a photo in the ether from a satellite image of a human eating ether? Because they leave soul imprints. Those have been my clues. Like, because I narrowed down two locations in Vancouver for an underground military base, and the one I settled on was the one that had an etheric stolus owl put on the road, and they cover it up. So a lot of your utility groups that go around in the morning and clean stuff up are covering up the same thing that causes crop circles is the same thing that leaves. And I'll send you some more pictures. I've got where they cover sand over images that are messages to us from the ether, which I've got one that apparently a guy died and turned half of his property into his face. And I thought maybe he was doing that to spite his wife, but it's pretty clear, you know. Some of the images are from God's perspective, and some of them are from. It's funny. You're going to get goosebumps, Jonah, when you see what I'm talking about. That if you get on the satellite things, and if your eyes are starting to adjust to have eyes to see, you'll see it, and it's going to touch you. I haven't even had the strength to go look at where some of my family died and see if they've left an imprint, but
Mm.
I expect they may have.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too what you talk about the bloodlines, just to circle back to connect back a little bit to
Yes.
what we were talking about earlier. Um, so the bloodlines, I mentioned the bloodlines specifically in reference to, and we kind of got distracted by Malleus Maleficorum and all that
But
talk,
that's
which is,
awesome. I'm going to look
I
into
love
that.
it. I love it. Yeah, no, look it up. It's really, but one of the things that he talks about when in the political section, he explains that actually today everyone looks at the historic, not the true Catholic Church, not the Vatican. Again, I always make that distinction because people are confused about it. But footnote I want to come back to, help me remember, please, is my timeline is 2029, not 2026 or 7, like you mentioned earlier. But I'll explain why in a second. Um, but okay, so he was saying that in the Inquisition, there were two Inquisition courts in every regency, right? There was an Inquisition court of the king and an Inquisition court of the church. The church almost never, if ever, actually ordered the burning at stake of or stoning of anyone. That was all, or the beheading of anyone. That was all the
Royal.
ecclesial. I mean, the royal courts.
Yeah.
Why? This is what's interesting. The royal bloodlines were under full siege at that point by the satanic bloodlines. The satanic bloodlines were using covens of witches. This is all in that book. Covens of witches to target the wives and the queens and the ladies and the duchesses to strike them with the sickness and present one of their witch maidens to win the heart of the king, to merge the royal bloodlines and the satanic bloodlines. So what happened is, why all of a sudden did it all stop? Why did all the manifestations that were frightening across all of Europe stop? Why did the Inquisition stop? Why did the executions by the royal court stop? Because they were successful. They
No.
took
Oh, you
they
just hit it.
took control of the
You
royal
just
bloodlines.
That is the MO. That's their MO that you can see it out throughout history. That's why the Taiping Jews disappeared when they got into the royal dynasty, right, in China. And that's why when the tribe of Dan migrated all the way to Scotland, that they then married into the royalty and then they disappeared because they were the Picts. The tribe of Dan became the Picts, who then went to Scotland and were there, shared space for about 300 or 400 years, and then disappeared. You don't disappear. That is the parasite, and they have taken the host, and they usually write
Correct.
the story after that.
Correct. And
Yeah.
that's why now the whole story is written by those same powers that be that are in control now. The story has been, oh, this evil doctrine, bloodthirsty doctrine inspired church
Yeah.
slaughtered so many spiritual people. No,
Yeah.
that's not what happened.
Yeah.
The royal bloodlines that you've now taken full possession of were trying to defend themselves from you. You know, it's
And
really
some say that's
interesting.
what Adolf Hitler was doing. I'll just say, because I only say that not to talk, but it's such a he's such a known boogeyman that I've noticed that they have an inversion method, that when there's an inconsistency, if you take the root cause of the inconsistency and reverse it, it'll make more sense.
Exactly. No, I'm glad you said that. And actually, so it's interesting if you think of word spells and brainwashing. We just talked about this conversation is blessed. Um,
I'm
we
enjoying talking.
just talked.
You know,
What's that?
I said I'm enjoying talking to you. This is good.
Likewise, sir. We just talked about how Michelson and Morley discovered the truth and they put up the lie of Einstein. When you
Exactly.
say somebody is smart today, you're like, he's a regular Einstein. It's become a household synonym to intelligent genius or something like that, right?
Well, the amount of
What's
brainwashing that we are limited to our potential is amazing.
right? But that's I'm drawing an analogy between that and the controversial Austrian painter because he's the most evil person every time he's synonymous with evil. So what is it that they're trying to hide? They're trying to hide the ether and what Michelson Morley discovered. What why is he portrayed as so evil so we would never even consider him not being evil?
Yes, exactly. And then that's their method. That's why they tell us that slavery, which I don't even know existed in the way they tell us, is so horrible, is so that we don't notice we're slaves by comparison.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're doing. So they are giving us little paper certificates that so the migration west wasn't about beavers or sea otters. It was about gold. Everyone
Yep.
would push for us to go dig their gold. So that's the Anunnaki story overlays on this, is that they did not raise up primates to be slaves. They lobotomized us. See, we're the
Yeah.
superior beings that have done everything, and that they've severed us from God. So we're in our period of severance right now. So that
Yeah.
in that the Christ consciousness is going to come back. It's coming back now. This may be the last Christmas without it.
So this. So okay. So we're getting close to the pin of 2029 again. But I want
Let me
to
just say
again.
that I
Yeah.
tried to decode the Prague astronomical clock, and I came up with October 13th, 2027. But that was before I found out
Okay.
Earth is bigger. They're hiding land under the date line, so it's not actually 24 hours.
What day in October did you say?
The 13th, October
That
13th.
that's my birthday, October 13th.
Shut up.
Yeah.
So there's no coincidences, only synchronicity, gentlemen.
Amen, brother. Amen. So and
That
I
is
want
an.
to get I want to get to 2029 in a second,
Go ahead.
but but well, no, let's do that first, and then we'll come back to the other thing about Christ consciousness. I want to talk
Okay.
to you about
Yeah, it's not
that.
going anywhere.
Right. So okay, so I believe that a clock was started in June of 1929.
Oh,
And that it was a 100-year clock, and it was started very specifically. There was a task that was requested by heaven, and we failed. Well, he whose
no, there's I
responsibility it was failed, right?
similar story. Yeah,
What's that?
I've got a similar story, but I don't want to. I'll tell you later.
So again, another parallelism, right? We just paralleled Hitler and Einstein, right? So look at the same parallel. You had before the French Revolution, 100 years to the day of the beheading of the King of France in the French Revolution and the Protestant Revolt, where they slayed all the priests and religious and just completely overthrew
That's why
the
the
current
Huguenots came to America, right?
order. It was around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so 100 years before that, to the day, a message was delivered to a little nun who had been having conversations with our Lord and said, "Go tell the King of France to consecrate France to my sacred heart, to devote and re-devote France to my sacred heart. If he doesn't, then the successor who sits on his throne will die a traitor's death in 100 years." It happened 100 years to the day.
Jonah,
Okay.
I'm seeing a lot of heart shapes in the etheric imprints I've been seeing, and I just commented on it like 2 days ago. I said, "There's another heart shape,"
Uh,
and I did say I got said that.
so now get this. Our Lady, our Lord's mother, appeared to those little children in Fatima, right? There was the miracle of the sun to prove to the world. It was even written of in the New York Times. It was pouring rain. The sun, this is again another indirect proof of the flat earth, came down, dried up everything, danced and flashed different colors in the sky, and then went back up to its normal height.
I
Dried
can
everything.
I could tell you how that happened.
And that was on October 13th, brother.
Oh my God, I did not catch that.
So that's why
I
I jokingly refer to myself as the dancing sun.
Oh, would you like me to explain what that was?
Yes, sure.
This goes back to the that thing that blew up the forests in Russia. Is that see our dome, the firmament, is frozen atmosphere. We're between two magnetic fields. That's why the quantum computer has to be super cold, is
Mm-hmm.
because they're creating the environment that we're living in right now. So what's outside of our dome is a lattice, a magnetic lattice of fields that, and then when two opposing poles overlap like they do here in our universe, it creates a super cold environment in which
Mm-hmm.
we are in a melted biocavity inside a block of ice, and that our ice ages are when the firmament, which is just a melted void, moves
Mm-hmm.
around the block of ice. So that's how the water
Right.
level up and down because when it moves across the land masses, where there's more land mass on this world than ours, and our current world is surrounded by a ring of ice. But what it is that so we're on a as above, so below, as within, as without, all that, right? I was going off the assumption that there was a separate universe below us, the upside down, all that, right? But then when I found out that the moon was a plasma reflection in negative light from the black sun, then I said, well, what is the cause of the tides? Well, what it is it's the oceans, the deep is a water barrier between our worlds, and that the underside, we're on the backside of a black hole. We're on the ass end of. Hello, okay, that contracts everything.
There you are. That's.
Are you there?
Yep. There you are. That was funny, right when you.
What's going on here?
Can you hear me?
Calling me. Hang up. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It was funny, right? Right
anyway,
when you
so
said,
right when you,
right when you said, can you hear me?
Okay,
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I was just gonna say it was funny, right when you said we're on the ass end of a black hole. Your screen went black.
Oh no! Hey,
that's hilarious.
Put in the commercial there.
There you go. Exactly. Okay, so then how does all this tie into to the sun dancing in the sky like that?
Okay. So listen. So when God said He'd separate the waters from the waters, He created a toroidal sphere. He just started spinning the water, created the vacuum, right? So that's a donut shape. But then it's compressed, and what is the big donut is the funnel at the North Pole, and the oceans are being sucked out up through the funnel at the North Pole. And then, like a water fountain that freezes, that's why we have watery shapes in the stars, because the water is falling down the backside of the firmament. And then that cycle. So if you look at the flow of the ocean currents, the deep current is from south to north, and it draws it up, and that's what the tides are. And that's why they don't want us going to the North Pole. And that I've got a Sumerian cylinder seal that shows a funnel going up, and it also has an atomic bomb. So we'd have to go over
and actually, if you look at the so hanging in my living room is that map, that old map from the 1500s that shows the actual habitable lands of Antarctica. I mean, of Antarctica in a circle, and has different flora and fauna pictured all around. But in the middle, it has that section with the four. It has the Black Mountain pictured, yes, or that little space where the Black Mountain allegedly is, or as the Norse called Valhalla, right? But that was paradise. But that's where there's the four rivers that all come together there. Anyway, super interesting. But again, I want to tie it back to October 13th and the miracle of the sun.
Okay, so anyway, so our firmament is frozen oxygen, right? And that's what HAARP is doing. This is how they control the weather. So it's oxygen. So our upper atmosphere, above our oxygen-rich atmosphere, which we breathe, is the 7 noble gases. They've been lying to us. It doesn't just thin. So it's the 7 noble gases. That explains the colors you see out of the aurora, because the excitement of noble gases makes them glow. That's why daylight is different than sunlight. Sunlight is the direct rays of the sun. Daylight is the excitation of the noble gases that glow, that give you that all over, the all over glow that we see and know as daylight. So we see it every day, evidence that they've been lying to us. So anyway, so when you melt that atmosphere, it doesn't turn to oxygen, just turns to a gas, but it's a gas that's heavier and denser than the 7 noble gases, so it falls to the ground. So when HAARP melts the firmament, you get a river of oxygen that falls to the ground, creates a low pressure system as it spreads out, that then the high pressure fills in, creates rotation, and that's how they're steering and creating hurricanes. Because I don't believe, anyway. So I always check, and HAARP is always active when we have these big storms. They have to tell us when it's turned on. So, but that's what they're doing down there, and that's why. So that is a re-intersection of 2 radio waves, like the Michelson effect or whatever that they say destroyed towers. But that's why they have that other cruise ship with that antenna array that goes around, because that's the second ray that creates the plasma ball that melts the firmament, that screws with the weather. I know, but yeah, this all hits me. I end up channeling, and sometimes if I don't have
Well,
somebody I can talk to, it gets lost.
yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I want to kind of keep bringing us back because I want to finish. I know you
Oh,
wanted to
okay. So
explain the
chunks
phenomena
of the
of the
firmament
dancing
came off.
sun.
So chunks of the firmament. So our local sun is a re-intersecting of the light rays from the black sun, right? So the black sun is on this side. Our sun
Hmm.
manifests over here, and that's that diamond or that tool pyramid shape, the hourglass shape that they
Yeah.
teach you.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that's it. But what happens is sometimes the firmament calves off and then it'll fall. So it's a frozen chunk, sky ice of atmosphere that falls, and as it burns up in the atmosphere, it explodes, and that's why they never found anything in Russia when it blew up the forest, and
Hmm.
that is what caused the sun to move because so a piece of the firmament had calved off. There were reports of odd sounds in the sky prior to this, to the Lady of Fatima miracle, right? So that when the rays of the sun came off and was on a different surface, right? Different angle that was causing the sun to move around. And that's why
Hmm.
it went down. And that's probably what started all
Interesting.
in North Africa too, was the sun probably was dragged across the surface.
Interesting. Huh. Um, okay, so to kind of to finish this the story of why 20 not 29, right?
Yeah.
So this dancing in the sun, and then so that showed everybody, okay, well this is a true apparition, this is a true vision, and then the two younger children died, and because Sister Lucia, her job wasn't finished yet, and so Our Lady said, Sister Lucia, I will come back to you. I will ask you a favor, and that you're going to need to deliver a message. You need to deliver to the Pope, but I'm not going to ask you yet. It's too soon. And so she said, okay, I'm here. I'm just wait. 2029. I mean, in 1929, she goes to Lucia and says, now it's time. I need you to go now and tell the Pope that he is to consecrate Russia to my Immaculate Heart. There's the heart again. To my Immaculate Heart. Consecrate Russia to my Immaculate Heart. And if he doesn't, then the errors of Russia will spread through the world. And what have we seen? And there's some other things tied to that about what would happen
No,
if, as a
you're hitting the
consequence.
way you are tying up some ends I didn't even know were there, man.
So check this out too. This it's gonna get better. So the connection to the King of France. So the last thing that Our Lady said to him is, if the Pope doesn't heed my warning and doesn't do what I ask, what my son is asking, then the same thing will befall him that befell the King of France. So now, what happened in June of that year, and why would Our Lady wait till then to ask? So, if you look at the history books, what happened in 1929? The Lateran Treaty was formed, which gave all of the papal lands, all the ecclesial lands across all of Europe, across Italy, to it created the Vatican City State and gave a majority of the lands to the country of Italy, to the new Republic of Italy. Now, what's interesting is the contract was signed and ratified, put into law a mere 8 days before Lucia was asked to go give this message to the Pope. So, in response, so basically, because that was a contract involved in the Lateran Treaty, was the Vatican accepting. Now, the Vicar of Christ, who's the
Yes, yes,
representative of
yes.
Christ on earth, right? He used to wear a triple tiara, a triple crown, which showed the King of Kings, the Most High King. Because in Aramaic, as you probably know, the reason why it's holy, holy, holy is because they didn't have comparative or superlative. They would repeat it twice for comparative. So if I were to say you're more holy than I would say holy, holy. If I say you're the most holy, it's holy, holy, holy. So that's how they did a comparative and superlative, was repetition. And so the triple crown was that's part of the symbolism there. But what's fascinating though is so he, in that contract that established the Vatican City State, which now we know the Vatican City State is a terrible one of the three
Yes, yes.
focal points of control for the deep state, or the power, the malicious powers that be. Is there was in that contract was submission to, so the King of Kings was submitted to the Rothschild banking system and the central banking system because it agreed to take a yearly stipend, an upfront cash sum to establish the Vatican City Bank, and then a yearly stipend from the Rothschild banking system, so long as, and that would continue as long as no pope spoke or did any acts publicly or publicly spoke on political matters. Stay out of politics, because the most powerful figure at the time in the whole world politically was the Pope.
Yeah.
And they're like, we don't want you getting in the way of our goals. And so then Our Lady basically went and sent this little girl, a meek one, to the Pope and said, this is what you're to do. Now that you've signed a contract with men to honor men before my son, now show that you honored your office that my son entrusted you with over the contracts with men. Your obligation to God over your obligation to men. And he didn't do it.
Oh, man, I was on the edge of my seat. He didn't do it. Oh my God.
So in 1958 is when the true pope was suppressed and a false pope was put. So none of the men since 1958 have been true popes, and they've all slowly stripped the Catholic Church of all of its rituals, of all which, I mean, for spiritual realities, rituals are so important, and it was all just literally stripped to the hilt. It's now the husk, as you mentioned. And so that's why June of 2029 is the date that I have my eyes on, because that's 100 years to the month that
I'm going to take yours. I'm going to go on that because, I've had very good intuitive, but I've always been early. You ever known something was going to happen, but then you waited so long it didn't happen that you give up and you move on, and then it happens. You know what I mean? We are always like that. And so I've been suspicious of my date, even though I know that, and it's funny you said that they signed a treaty. The Svalbard Treaty that was signed in 25 is the only known list of elite cabal members that I know of, because that's who signed that treaty. Was that it was all royalty, and it shows foreknowledge of what the year of darkness.
Well,
because they've got a giant city, and all of our stuff, the Smithsonian, that the audit he's doing, that's all covered to get our artifacts into the pyramid mine. The Louvre robbery was a false flag so that they could start moving stuff. The Vatican's already admitted they're moving manuscripts and priceless artifacts into the mine. It's called a company called Arctic World Archive, and that they have got survival villages built as the treaty spells out, that everybody's allowed to have free use of the Svalbard Islands, which is the most northern islands inside the Arctic Circle, which is going to be inside that little compass of where. So anyway,
which is all, and that's all currently.
I hate to say this, but Trump has been covering for all these moves. Like when Doge went and did the audit and fired everybody, that was cover so they could all sell their houses, and so the DC real estate market went and collapsed.
Well, but that area in the inner circle, the Arctic Circle, that's all by Google Maps. You can tell it's CGI covered up. It's Photoshop.
Did I send you the picture? I've got images of it without the cap on. That somebody had taken the image of the flat Earth, wrapped it onto a globe, and forgot to put the cap on the top.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so there's another synchronicity of timelines that make me even more confident in 2029. So the Second Vatican Council, which dismantled the entire Catholic Church, that was the beginning of the end, so to speak. That was opened in 1959. Remember how many years the people of Israel were exiled to Babylon? 70 years.
Yeah, and they were supposed to kill the Canaanites, and they didn't.
So they were exiled to Babylon, and they were held
right to the Holy Land.
They were held in captivity in Babylon for 70 years. 70 years from 1959 is 1929.
Damn.
And the whore of Babylon is described in scriptures as one of the last creation, one of the last big forces in that the whore of Babylon is dressed in scarlet and purple. Those are the two and she's riding the beast of Revelation. Remember this?
Yeah.
And she has spread her fornication with all nations of the earth. Well, Scripture, fornication is a betrayal to the covenant of God. When God calls something fornication, it's you worshiping another God, someone who's he's made his bride, the people of Israel, turning on him and praying to another God. So the whore of Babylon, think again, 70 years in Babylon, the whore of Babylon is the Catholic Church, this false church, this husk, as you
Yeah.
said. It's having multi-faith celebrations in
Yes.
Assisi
Oh, I
every
know.
year.
Oh, do you know what the
It's
plan is? The
it's
plan is that they're
constantly.
going to do Project Bluebeam. Okay, so this goes back to the venom. The venom is what severed our pineal gland from our Christ consciousness, right?
Mhm.
That's also what was in the COVID vaccine. COVID wasn't
Right.
for COVID. It was they were giving us more venom, which is venom causes loss of taste and smell. Okay, so that's why people are having trouble because they're treating the wrong. The venom is what's causing the long COVID. But since they can't tell people that,
Mhm.
they're letting it fester. So,
Well,
but
it's just like the Spanish flu. It was all the people who got
I
the shot to
know.
protect them from the Spanish flu that killed them all.
Yes, that it was the vaccines they gave our troops before they sent them. And they
Mm-hmm.
called it the Spanish flu as a disinformation, so they wouldn't. Yeah, because the Spanish flu came out of that Montauk place where they did some of the MK Ultra experiments originally.
Which, funnily enough, Stranger Things just came out with their 5th season, I think it is. Which that you referred to indirectly before calling it the
Yes.
Upside Down.
Mm-hmm.
But I always tell people it's a documentary, not a fiction. And also, did you know the original title was supposed to be Montauk, but they changed it last minute?
Oh my God, really? Well, that would have been too much. That would have been giving away too much.
Right,
We would have
exactly.
got there a little earlier, but yeah, you know.
But what's interesting, one final point to circle back to tie a bow on what I was saying about the whore of Babylon. It's interesting though, if you note in Scripture, it doesn't say purple and red; it says purple and scarlet. In canon law, which prescribes the colors of the vestments and of that bishops and cardinals are to wear, the legal color in the law in their book of law is purple and scarlet, not red.
Oh.
It's those two words specifically. Very
What's
interesting.
funny is funny. I don't usually get a chance to talk about fornication, or at least not. Anyway, but I looked it up because I came across that word again used in something similar to what you're saying, and I looked into it, and it said that the fornication isn't to describe the act; it's to describe where the act is committed. Apparently, outside of the home.
Yeah.
So fornication is the act
Interesting.
of where you're doing it, not so much the act itself. And I thought that was kind of enlightening. But so anyway, that's my joke there. I got
you know what else is curious actually about true meanings of words is the ancient Greek understanding of pornography was actually the arousal of any emotion of any kind, not necessarily sexual, for the enjoyment of the emotion itself, rather than because emotions are supposed to lead us to good or steal us away from evil. So even in philosophical understanding, even a roller coaster would be porn. They would consider pornographic because you're disordering your emotions. You're giving yourself the sensation of fear. So then you're deadening because of the intensity. You're deadening. If we think of the practical, why they would say it's unhealthy, the practical consequences is if you're deadening the sensitivities of your fear sensor, so to speak.
That makes sense.
Then you're not going to be afraid if you should be afraid, when you should be afraid,
I agree with that. This goes back to I didn't know if there was generational trauma or anything, but then I came across, and I can't back it up by telling you where I heard it, but that humans are born with 2 innate fears: heights and snakes, and that the fallen may be the ones doing this to us, and that we were severed by venom could be generational trauma. That those are our 2 born with fears: is heights. I thought, no coincidences, so it must mean something.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I agree. Everything happens for a reason. Everything means something. Absolutely.
And that's kind of what I've been seeing. So the other thing I should say about the way this timeline is going to contract and switch over and enter into a new golden age is that 144,000 people are going to wake up, and we are going to focus our intent because we're co-creators of this universe. That's what they've been lying to us about, that we can force changes in our timeline. But since there's only now, we're in superposition. The future is here. It's in superposition. That's what a quantum computer is, right? That's what they're trying to get to, is being able to have everything be everything at once, right? And what our timeline is us with through the flicker rate, taking in the amount of information that's being borne out by our intent. See, so everything is ether at different frequencies. So you can change, everything can become anything because we're all ether. So I don't think that there's atoms and nuclei the way they say. It's all a story, just like everything outside of the firmament has been made up by Disney in the last 60 years or 80 years or whatever it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
That none of that is out there. That's all a story. And that with your intent to believe it, it creates it. And so 144,000 of us will focus our intent, collapse the now on what we want, because that's what 9/11 was they are doing a Babylonian black magic ritual, and that it's a play designed to fool us into giving them our intent to live in a world that has terrorists and need to defend Israel, or whatever their intent was. I don't. There we go. Now I got the thing plugged in.
Well,
So whatever their intent was that's how they're
yeah.
doing it. And that's what the school shootings were. They were trying to manufacture consent for us giving up our guns. That's why they, a lot of this. So everything. See, what really knocked me for a loop and had me on my back is when it occurred to me I don't know anything, because everything I know they taught me. And so when I realized that it was all BS and I had to go back and I could only go on, right, I couldn't trust history. History's fake. So I had to start putting together obvious if this then that in what I see every day.
Well, and this is why, to me, again, going back to the purpose of the show, Philosopher King, is this is why, to me, Aristotle is so important, is because he wrote the organon, which is literally means the toolbox. It's logic is the art of reasoning well. If you have a logical, critical thinking mind, you can deduce and expose. You can deduce the truth, explore the truth, and expose the lies much more readily, even if you're not scientifically trained. Trust the science. No, well, yeah, the greatest science actually is
those
philosophy.
Are the Pharisees. Those are the false prophets. Those are false priests.
So this is where I'd push back a little bit on the whole idea of us being creators. I think we are.
Don't limit yourself, Jonah. That's the lie.
You're part of God. We are. So I do believe that we are united to God, and I do believe that in the sense of Christ consciousness, I shy away from that term because I know a lot of New Agers use it to try to take away from the truth of Christ being a historical
they do.
incarnation of God. I think that's a really important truth. And so, like, our intellects are a participation and a direct participation in the intellect of God, and we're all connected that way.
Yes.
And also, like, I don't know if you've seen it yet. If you haven't, I would definitely recommend it. A few weeks, maybe a month ago, I had a Vince on this podcast, and we had an awesome conversation about the nature of knowledge and will and free will and intellect. It was wisdom. Oh, it was beautiful.
That's why I was talking about Vince with the AI, and I really like what he's doing, because free will is the key. So in the Bible, and the way Casey explains it, is that we're going to have a choice. But I already see the predictive programming for them to set it up as if you choose Christ consciousness, you're giving up free will, and you're not.
Well, and what's interesting is too, like, that's why I didn't vote for Trump, for example, this last time, because I didn't want to give the consent of my will to what I knew was coming. Even though, I mean, everybody was like, "Oh,
how
it's
long
the
have
lesser."
You been awake? How long have you been aware of this?
So I've been awake. I mean, I feel like I wake up more every day. But when I first started to see through the veil was not too long after 9/11. I would say 2010, 2011, maybe.
You. I should have seen it in Waco. Honestly, that was such an obvious tell.
Yeah. Actually, it might have been a little earlier. It was in 2008 or 9, actually, I think, because it was my first or second year of philosophy in the monastery. Is when I first started to kind of wake up.
Do you know why monasteries are always up high in places? It's because that's where mana collects. That's where the ether collects. And they don't, the Anasazi Indians, they didn't climb up on a cliff and then bring food up there every day. They climbed up to the cliff to get food. They stayed there.
I only needed when I was in the monastery. So I had a vow of silence for 6 years. So
Wow.
yeah, so it was poverty, chastity, obedience, and silence. And I tell you, man, so we were a singing order, so it wasn't like strict no sound out of our bodies, but all of our energies and our vocal power was given to singing the psalms and God's praises in church. Right, 4 hours a day we were singing. It was amazing, right? So
I bet you fell into quite the trance. The what do they call that? It's that zone.
I'm telling you, man, I probably for it was like for a four or five of those 6 years, I only slept 2 or 3 hours a night.
I
I
believe
didn't
you.
need it.
I swear to
Didn't
God,
need it.
my sleep ever since I woke up 6 months ago. And like I said, that was the download, and it happened during the solar storm too. I think they said that it was like a G4 or 5, whatever that means. But I was able to track it back and go, "Whoa, that's kind of weird." Because then, and then so what I know the Bible says is that if I'm not the first, but there's going to be others, because He'll pour out His entire Spirit into the people so that they can
Oh,
give people the way to discern from the false prophets.
thank you. That's what I was gonna the reason I brought up my conversation with Vince
Yeah,
is because if you know something, right? That idea, let's say
you feel it.
dogness, whatever that dogness is, that form
Yeah,
of dog, you bring it into your own mind. So
yeah,
like your mind, our minds are not unlimited. Our minds are limited
yes.
in a sense, right?
In a
Like
sense,
we
yeah.
don't have the infinite knowledge of God, right? We can only understand so much. So, but a form and or an idea of something is an inferior, that the form of that thing in my mind is an inferior reality than it existing out in itself, right? But if I love something, I conform myself to, when I use my will, I conform myself to that thing. So one brings the thing into me, and if it's if it's a lower being, then I elevate it by knowing it. If it's a higher being, I lower it by knowing it. But if it's my will, if I love chocolate cake to the sacrifice of everything else in my life, I become a pitiful person.
Gluttonous, yeah.
If I love God and truth, I become a wonderful person, much more wonderful person, right? So our will, the choice of our will, locks us on and conforms us to the thing loved, whatever it is,
Yes.
right? So the incarnation of Christ, even though it seems to us that it was God was going out of himself, no, God was bringing human nature,
Yeah.
knowing it intimately,
Mhm.
into God.
Mhm.
And so that was the incarnation. The sending of the Holy Spirit on Pentecost was the God loving man. So he went out and became every man and became in every man. And the coolest thing about it is that reversed the curse of the Tower of Babel. Because Tower of Babel, we had one language,
Yes.
and we were too advanced because it was a godless advancement. And now, after his love, the scattered languages of the earth on the feast of Pentecost, the disciples, everybody heard in their own tongue. So they had this power to connect and communicate with everybody.
Which is the resonant telepathy. So what you're saying is what I see as man's fall. The Pentecost is when we were severed and had to start speaking, because we didn't speak or write when we had resonant telepathy, because the Van Allen radiation belt is the Akashic record, that
Yeah.
it is
Oh,
the
you don't mean
magnetic memory of
you
all
don't
human thought.
you don't mean the Pentecost was the fall. You mean that when we were severed at the Tower of Babel, that's when we stopped the resonant.
There's been multiple. That's what you see. See, you said it earlier. We've been here before.
Yeah,
God
yeah.
is a refiner of silver, and each time we get refined. So there has to be a beginning and an end of a refining period. So that's what I'm saying. I say that a lot of what we think of as a linear historical story might be multiple stories overlaid from multiple refining
Yeah,
periods.
no, what I was trying to clarify is that the Pentecost was, we started, the apostles understood, were understood by everybody.
Yeah,
We had
that's
already been
through resident.
severed.
Then they
Yeah,
were able to speak through
right.
resonance.
Exactly. Yeah, instead of yeah, exactly. You're saying that was reversing the fall, the
Yeah,
severance.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
that God was
exactly.
giving them, and I think we see that. Like, if you notice, there's always the wise person that can see, can scry, whatever. I do like
Mm-hmm.
geomancy and stuff. But that
Usually,
that those
usually
people that
bald.
were those
That's
people
good.
that were, I think that's when we slowly were disconnected. I think a lot of those wars were fought. I think the other inversion is that the giants weren't evil. I think the giants were still innocent, like we were in the garden, and that we were the ones that were attacking them. And I think we see some of that in the Chucky and the imp figure that they put in horror movies. That the small evil little thing, I think, is, and then because then we see the other archetype of the big dumb guy, and like
Mm-hmm.
I'm forgetting the name of some of the books, but because I'm not the literary expert, but you see characters, and I've always kind of said that there's I've met a lot of people, but I really have only met 12 because you see the same person over and over. You know what I mean? That there's types that people do fall into a role and have a role they play, and that sometimes you don't really and then that's why you might feel comfortable with somebody immediately like yourself. Somebody I know you. I
Mm-hmm.
mean I know this person, and they say, but and then a lot of that is with the that we've been here before is that we are allowed, if we acquire karmic debts that we have to repay, when this goes to the reincarnation thing, is that we then have to go unlearn that. So that's what the reincarnation is for. That somebody who did something wrong previously and screwed up his refining process has to do it again, and that's why Casey had said that he'd become more known about that we actually plan our lives, and that there's soul groups. It's a lot of. I mean, look, I'm not going to step on anybody's beliefs, because I'm open to it, because they say that that's why the chosen will not come out of the churches. I mean, that's why, like, even his 12 disciples, one was a tax collector, and one guy said he was chief sinner, and they don't, and then that, and see, and I've been kind of wondering why me. I mean, I've literally 6 months ago didn't believe in ghosts, right? I
Yeah.
didn't, I had a personal relationship with Jesus Christ because I felt it, but everything else I was, kind of, but it's amazing that how wrong I was, and I'll
Yeah.
admit that, up front, that I was wrong. I've been convinced that all this is true, that we do have, that there is something coming, and that we're even talking about it probably. But so anyway, so what goes with that is the concept of a bubble of inertia. So if you are the one who collapses the wave and forces the now to your liking, right? Like, so say we come up to the point where 144,000 of us, or whatever the number is, force the deception to end and we start the new golden era. What happens is it doesn't look like a miracle. Only the people that collapse the wave will see the stitches come up behind them. You see what I'm saying? Otherwise, you end
Mm-hmm.
up in like a roofie loop spiral, where you're like, did I just take an Ambien? Oh, no, I'll take another Ambien. And you don't know what's going on. So somebody's got to know what's going on. And that's the bubble of inertia. And that is the person. And that goes to Crowley, who has the Lima Temple, his religion he stood up. And that Rose Kelly divorced Aleister Crowley, moved to Portland, Oregon, opened a Thelema Temple. They do their services in conjunction with the Mormon Temple, and that her brother-in-law built the Stonehenge replica out in the Columbia River Gorge to do their ceremonies on that very powerful ley line. So that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that I stumbled on and was like, what in the hell is this about? Because I've been to the Stonehenge, and it's just you can't even see it from 84 as you go through the gorge. It's
Well,
kind of on a bluff, and it's a full size replica of Stonehenge.
interesting. Well, that's cool. But it's actually interesting too if you look at the origins of the Church of Mormon, Church of Latter Day Saints, Mormonism,
Yes.
and the
I'm not trying
origins
to,
of.
but look, everybody in the pews is innocent. It's
Yeah,
everybody in
yeah,
the
no,
institution has been corrupted.
absolutely, absolutely, and then also Jehovah's Witnesses. The origins of both of those um, are Freemasonic and occultic. They're the mystery schools,
That's,
and
I
it's
was just telling my
very.
wife, it all stems from the mystery schools. That's what they were teaching them, is this stuff that you and I are talking about right now. And that was the one thing that I saw, the cosmology of the Freemasons, and I said, well, if they believe this, I should start working off that assumption and see what else I find. Oh my God.
Well, I mean, it's even just in the two pillars. They have the sun on top and the moon on the top of the other. It's right there in front of you, and then the other thing that's really interesting is about if you look at the hypocrisy of today's world. And they're literally it's gaslighting and it's cognitive
Yes.
dissonance because they literally tell us that we need to get rid of the advancements of Western culture,
Yes.
of the music and the architecture and the art of Christian Europe, and just get rid of all of it because it's all colonialism, it's all this garbage. Go back to this true spiritualism of the native tribes and all this. They were really in tune with
Paganism.
the earth and all, paganism. Okay, yeah, they were in tune with the earth. Sure, that doesn't mean that that's a more elevated religion, first of all, or that there's more truth there. But
Yeah.
also, and that this is the point I'm actually trying to make, not that that was a side comment, is that
Which has we could
all
go on for days on that too. Actually.
it's true, it's true. All of those peoples, all of those tribes, all had the same cosmology that I call the biblical cosmology, the flat
Yes.
Earth, the toroidal,
Yep.
the firmament overhead, right?
Yep.
All of that they had. So how hypocritical for you guys
Exactly.
to tell us that they were fools in one area and enlightened beyond on our understanding in another.
Well, that's the whole thing that they tell us. It was the Dark Ages. That's the inversion method that we
Exactly.
threw our poop out the window. We didn't do that. I mean, just odd things, and it is a lot of gaslighting. We've been lied to. Let me just real quick. To that us being our ideal selves. I came across the story of somebody who was detransitioning, and my heart just absolutely broke. That somebody, because of this deception, that they would go so far as to tell somebody that God made a mistake and that you need to cut your body parts off. But so there's an organization, Colorado for Kids, and I told her I would mention that because I was so touched and so infuriated in that somebody would be that evil to do that, because I know that that's not true, and that this generation will see the earth restored, and anybody who's been harmed by the deception will get it back.
I agree. I agree. And actually, I think that's what I believe is going to happen in 2029 is the one of the greatest spiritual destroyers of the on earth over the last century has been the Vatican Church.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to be routed for all to see. It's going to be destroyed,
The
and
evil will
it's
be
going to be
removed
it's
from
going to
this
be
world.
a glorious day. But
Yeah.
then the true pope, the true successor of Peter, the true shepherd, who's the true vicar of Christ, well, the humble-hearted one who's been in hiding for this whole time, for the last 70 years, will finally come back to surface. that's
Amen.
that's my belief. So
And I know that.
may
And
it be so, right?
well, no, but it so confirms it, because I would have been 2 years early and given up. I'd have been like I was wrong, and then while I was out pumping gas or something, somebody would have it would have happened, and I'd have missed it. And that was the other thing. Wanting to get a hold of Ted, and then being able to talk to you, is that I was almost going to explode with just knowing after I had
Hmm.
my vision. It was just like, oh my god, and it was
Yeah.
hard because so what I'd like to do is people like us need to be available for people when they do wake up, because nobody listened to me. Okay, it's
Well, and that's where you make a really good point because really, I know, I mean, and I really appreciate Ted's the way that he'll just go after somebody about flat Earth, like how he attacks. I appreciate where he's coming from and why, and he has his comedic way about it, and that's
yeah,
fine. But for me, like the way that I look at it is like truth is like if you're building a Lego tower. If I give you a piece toward the top and you're only a third of the way up, and I've given you one of the crown pieces, you're gonna be like, oh, it looks like a castle piece, but I don't know where it goes, and they'll put it aside. It might not be for another 10 years. Once they built up the rest, they'll be like, oh, that's what Jonah told me. Aha, click,
that
right?
is what I had in my pocket when I had my vision and started piecing it all together. I had a pocket full of Legos that I
Really?
had just accumulated over my lifetime. That was just like, when am I going to find the answer to this? And it
Exactly. There
just
you go.
all
And it's
started
click, click, click,
landing.
click, 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 click. Yeah, exactly.
Perfect
Yep. And
analogy, because
then
that's exactly what happened to me.
another one of my favorite analogies, because I believe, and you mentioned a personal, like your personal knowledge and relationship with Jesus. So, like for me personally, and one of my favorite analogies for how, because I feel like God, it's not impersonal, it's very personal. and his love for us is very, very personal and individual. But he's also very patient with us. And so it's like a chess game. Like, if you're playing high level chess, you can't check the king too early until all the pieces are in place. If you start the sequence of checks and leave a back door for the king to escape, you're going to lose him, and you might lose the game because of that.
That's so funny you say that, because we are in checkmate. We've already won. There's moves to be made on the board, but they know they're going to lose.
All the pieces are already set up. Exactly.
We're in that period where we're just playing because we already know the ending.
But also, this is where I have patience with other people who are trying to wrestle with new ideas and trying to get there, trying to wake up, trying to pull the wool off their eyes. Is if I'm just a little pawn in this person's life on the chessboard, and God's moved me into a position where I could move forward by myself and check that king, but no, I'm going to wait for the King of Kings to direct me when to move next, because he's got a lot of other pieces in play in this person's life to win their heart and open their mind to his love and truth. So
Right.
if I try to do what I think is best and pressure or attack or insist that they now admit that the earth is flat, that they now admit that World War II was a lie, that they now
You can't
admit,
pull them out of the matrix.
you can't.
You
You
can only
gotta
leave
wait.
Easter eggs and let them come to it themselves.
You gotta wait for the grandmaster of all chess games ever, the King of Kings himself, to get all of his pieces in place to win that heart. Now he may see that heart may still choose not to be won, may choose to walk away, and that's up to that person.
And some people are
But
going to do that. It's going to hurt.
I know,
It's going to hurt
and
to see, but yeah.
so exactly. So that's where I feel like the best that I can do is to gently and lovingly present different truths and ideas, and let him take care of the details.
I've got a bit more urgency because I think that the reason all these all these threads are being tied up is because we're in the last chapter. I feel
So.
like I'm in this book that, it's one of those books that you just don't want it to end. Right. And then when you start to get to the end of it, you start seeing they're tying up all these things that you saw in the past, and you go, oh man, this is about to be over. But I'm always wrong on the time. Like I said, I get the intuition. My timing's been really bad.
It's funny. Somebody told me once years ago, and I'll never forget it. I said, God is always on time, so you can always trust him. Because he's never a moment late, so you can always trust him. But he's never a moment early either,
Yep.
and that's the hard part.
That's the funny. I was in the Army, and it was always hurry up and wait. And I always thought, what battle did we lose because we didn't show up 5 hours early? I just was kind of wondering what the genesis of that was. But anyway, no, it is. We're gonna. It's over. We've already won. This is the period in which the meek inherit the earth. Uh, this earth has been used and had so many resets over the years. That's why we've got, that's why there's tunnels under Phoenix and everything. But it'll be restored, and it'll be in our generation.
We'll see it ourselves with our own eyes.
Yes.
That I'm sure of. What's interesting is from the very first time I heard about as a child the end times, I knew in my gut, I knew in my heart, I would see it. I would see those.
No,
days.
I knew it. I knew it the whole time. So and I was a bit dismayed when we were talking with Ted and Vince, and I said, "Do you think other people got this call from Jesus and just didn't answer it?" And they were like, "Yeah, oh, I'm sure of it." And I thought, "Oh man, that just I mean." Everybody wants to be a gangster until it's time to do some gangster shit. And when Jesus pulled up and said, "Get in the car, we're gonna battle Satan," I was like, "Let me get my jacket." You know what I mean? I've been waiting, like you said, waiting my whole life for this to come.
And that's part of the reason for the podcast again, is that this is my response to the sense of urgency that it's coming, to get some of these ideas in circulation.
I'd like to say that if this is going to be on Christmas Eve, that I absolutely I'm a imperfect human being, but what I'm talking about and what people are going to have is absolutely within the spirit of the Bible and of Christ, and it's all it'll all make sense later on. In hindsight, everything will make sense. That's how with any medium or prediction. In hindsight, you'll be able to look back and go, "Oh, well, why didn't I see that?"
Yeah, well, and it's like I like to remind people that the book of Revelation wasn't meant for us to 10, 15, 20 years ahead of time understand what was coming and when,
No.
but when things start to pop off for us to be able to be like, aha, this is
Yep.
it. Now,
That's
did you
why I
know, by
said
the
look to
way,
the sky for signs and to mark the seasons.
so in Revelation, I want to say it's Revelations 12, if I'm not mistaken, with the great sign appeared in the sky, the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. You remember that piece?
Yeah, but I'm trying to see how it applies now because I'm
In
going
in
back and seeing
in
everything like you
in
said. Like
in
it applies.
yeah, go look this up. In 2017, um, it was I think if my memory serves, it went from November of 2016 to November of 2017, and it was a year almost. It was like a 9 month long where sign in the sky where uh over the constellation Virgo, in the crown of over the constellation of Virgo, there are, I think it's like 4 stars in the crown, and then there were 3 other ones. There were 3 planets that are almost never there, and then Jupiter was in the womb. The king planet was in the womb region because it said that she was in travail about to give birth, is what the sign in the sky was. The
Yes.
Jupiter, the king planet, went into retrograde and stayed in the womb of the Virgin for 9 months before it started moving forward again. And those nine, it's insane. And this,
No,
if you look at,
that's amazing.
and the moon, those are the only 2 times in history that the moon, that Virgo rose with the moon under her feet and on her head those 12 stars. So no other time, if you go forward 4,000 years or back 4,000 years using a program like Starry Night, never again will that specific arrangement happen. Look it up. It's
No
insane. It's
coincidences. There's no
beautiful.
coincidences, Jonah,
No
and that is
coincidence at
amazing.
all.
So I got a question. I got a question. So
Yeah.
I have felt like I have found myself in a life position where I'm able to devote my life to, and I felt like that was what I was supposed to do, was to get this
Yeah.
message out so that people could have the discernment to tell the false priests, because there are people online, social media. There a lot of them may not even be real people that are gaslighting people, like we said, and that if you don't have a base of knowing, you don't have the ability to discern, because we don't know where we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the message that, so what my question is to you then is, how would somebody go about, if you need to tell people, talking to you is part of it, but I haven't figured out how. The Lord hasn't guided me to how this works, even though I know it will, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then to say just out loud, how do you wake up enough people? And I see 144,000 because the number keeps reoccurring. And I'm going off of the Georgia Guidestones that there's only 500 million people on this planet. So,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it didn't say get down to, it said maintain the human
It's
population at
it's
500 million.
it's
And
it's true.
I've never seen enough people in one place to say that there isn't only 500 million people on this planet.
I know, and actually, it's, Ted and I joke. Ted jokes. We all joke about this with Ted, but Ted pushes this a lot about It doesn't seem reasonable to think that there's 8 billion people
No,
on
of
this,
course not. No, there
and
isn't.
even population experts in China will say that the number is closer to 400 million.
I saw a study, somebody added up the population of the top 300 cities in India. It only came up with a couple hundred million, and they were like, there's not a billion people hiding in the countryside.
Yeah,
So, and there's a lot of countries that I don't even know if exist. I'm supposed to be of German heritage, but I realize that Germans are supposed to be still the largest ethnic group in the United States, but yet there's very little cross cultural. You know what I mean? I never see German tourists. I never see a lot of travel. Yeah, if we're all German cousins, like they say, I just don't see a lot of it, and their history seems to be pretty muddled as well. So
yeah.
the entire storyline of what's going on in Europe is for me up for debate.
So to answer your question about where to send people, you know, this is going to air on Christmas Eve, right? And maybe we're approaching the 2 hour mark, which is where I like to cut it off, anyways.
Sure, sure,
So
sure.
maybe this is a good way to start to wrap up the
Yeah,
conversation. I feel like we could talk for hours, and I'd like
we
to
could.
have you on again because I think this is a beautiful conversation. But before I answer your question, Is there anything you want to say to everybody? Like where to find you? Are you on Twitter a lot? Is that your
Oh yeah, no,
primary?
but they shadow ban me. I don't even get to see my own posts
Okay.
sometimes.
Okay.
But I'm on Soju under Wolfhound. I think 95, and I've got some essays of as I was waking up. I've got a bunch of video clips I don't have edited yet from my. I woke up at 3 in the morning and drove to Crystal River, Florida, via Grand Canyon and the Black Hills,
Mm-hmm.
and
Nice.
I did some ruminating on, or hypothesizing on that, and it shows. I haven't posted those yet, but I'm on X and Soju, and I'm with your guys' help, maybe
Yeah.
I'll have more
Absolutely.
stuff. I've got a lot of topics that need to be covered, but
I love it.
and,
I
and
love it.
evidence to prove every one of them. That's the thing. I'd really like to show some of the photos I have. They're amazing.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. We'll have to do that sometime. The last question I have for you before I answer your question.
Sure.
Do you have a Christmas message for folks since this is Christmas Eve?
Hang on, be jubilant. It's coming. This is, I mean, if this world seems crazy and upside down, there's a reason for that, and it's gonna shake itself out. And we haven't been living in harmony with nature and not with God,
Mm,
and it's gonna come to an end. And like we said, the earth will be restored. I'm not good on the timeline, but I have absolute faith in telling people that this is all going to be healed.
amen. Amen. Um, well, so to answer your question and also give my little Christmas message to folks as we kind of wrap up here, um, the word became flesh and dwelt among us.
Yep.
What is a word? It's an intellectual concept.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the incarnation of the most of truth. He's the way, the truth, and the life. The
Yep.
word used for way there is not like a highway or a road. It's methodos, the progress forward, the method. He is the method to find the truth and
Yep.
to find true meaning in life.
You're
So
giving me goosebumps, Jonah. That ties it all up. I like
and
that.
and there's the two fulcrum events of our Lord's life: his incarnation and then his passion. The incarnation, well, the passion he happened in the way, the graphic on display way,
Yeah.
because he wanted to show how intense his love for us is. The incarnation happened in such a gentle and quiet way because he, as a little helpless babe, because he wanted to show us how approachable he is. He wanted to encourage us to approach him. Now, I'm a broken man. I have wandered far from the path many a time in my life. I I am a little stable, a broken stable. There's a lot of more beautiful people out there, a lot of more intelligent people, more wonderful people, more inspiring people. Jesus was rejected by so many. So many innkeepers said, "Nope, no room, no room." All he's asking of us this Christmas is to make our hearts, as broken as they are, a poor little manger for him to come to. That's all he wants. And there he will, from within, guide us to the truth and the life that he will bring us.
I'm going to talk
Amen.
to you more often. That is beautiful.
Amen. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Russ, thank you so much for such a beautiful conversation.
We're going to talk
It,
again, Jonah. You're not going to be able to get rid of me now.
absolutely, sir. I look forward to it.
Thank
All
you.
right. My pleasure. God bless
Merry
everybody.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.